John Anderson was a millionaire with everything he could ever want. Big houses, fast cars, and a life full of excitement. But no one knew his biggest secret. John, a man who seemed untouchable, had fallen in love with someone no one would ever expect. Maria, a single mother working as a cleaning lady at his office. One night, something strange happened. Maria was cleaning John's office when she found a letter hidden under his desk. The letter wasn't meant for her, but what she read changed everything. John had written it, but it wasn't a love letter. It was something much more dangerous, and it was clear Maria was not supposed to know about it. John was used to people doing whatever he wanted. He was rich, and that gave him power. But Maria was different. The first time they met, she accidentally bumped into him, spilling coffee on his expensive suit. She apologized, clearly nervous, but John didn't yell or get angry. Instead, he smiled. For some reason, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Maria thought she was invisible in John's world, just another worker in a sea of people who cleaned up after him. But John started to notice her more and more. He would stay late at the office just to watch her quietly clean. Something about her felt different, and he didn't know why, but it made his heart race in a way it never had before. The letter Maria found was important. It mentioned a deal John was making, something shady that could ruin him if it got out. Maria couldn't believe it. How could a man like John, who seemed so perfect, be involved in something so dark? She wanted to forget about it, but it haunted her. The next day, Maria was careful around John, trying to act normal, but it was hard. She didn't want him to know she had read the letter. At the same time, she couldn't stop wondering if the man she was slowly falling for had a dangerous side she didn't know about. John couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Maria, and it confused him. He had met plenty of women, rich, beautiful, and charming, but none of them had ever made him feel like this. And yet, Maria was just a cleaning lady. It didn't make sense. He started to question himself, wondering if this was all a mistake. Meanwhile, Maria was scared. She thought about quitting her job, but she needed the money to take care of her son. She didn't want to be involved in whatever secret John was hiding, but there was something about him that kept pulling her in. Could she trust him, or was she in danger? One evening, John couldn't hold back anymore. He asked Maria to have dinner with him, saying it was just a way to thank her for all her hard work. Maria hesitated but eventually agreed. She told herself it wasn't a date, but deep down, she knew it was more than that. The dinner was perfect, and John treated her like a queen. But the more they talked, the more Maria realized she was in deeper than she thought. John wasn't just charming, he was hiding something, and Maria couldn't shake the feeling that she was playing with fire. A few weeks after the dinner, Maria discovered something even more shocking. While cleaning John's office late one night, she found a hidden drawer filled with papers and pictures. Among them was a picture of her, taken without her knowing. Why would John have a photo of her? Maria's heart raced as she realized the truth. John had been watching her long before she even noticed him. She was scared, confused, and didn't know what to do. Should she confront him? Should she leave the job? But part of her didn't want to let go of the feelings she had for him. John noticed a change in Maria. She was quieter, more distant, but he didn't understand why. He tried to get closer to her, even offering her a promotion at work. He wanted her to be near him all the time, but Maria wasn't sure if that was a good idea. Despite her fears, Maria couldn't deny the growing connection between them. John's attention made her feel special, but she still couldn't forget the secrets she had uncovered. Every time she looked at him, she wondered if she was falling for the real John or the version of him he wanted her to see. One evening, Maria couldn't take it anymore. She decided to confront John about the picture and the letter. She didn't care if it cost her the job, she needed to know the truth. John was shocked when Maria showed him the picture, but instead of denying it, he came clean. John admitted that he had been watching her, but not in a creepy way. He said he was fascinated by her strength, her kindness, and the way she took care of her son. As for the letter, John explained that it was part of a risky business deal, one that could go terribly wrong, but he had no choice. Maria didn't know if she believed him, but for now, it was enough to keep her close. After their confrontation, John promised Maria that he would stop keeping secrets from her. He wanted to earn her trust. Maria wasn't sure if she could believe him, but something inside her wanted to give him a chance. The tension between them grew, but so did their feelings for each other. John and Maria began spending more time together outside of work. They laughed, they shared stories, and slowly, Maria started to let her guard down. Just when Maria started to feel comfortable around John, she discovered something even more troubling. While cleaning his home, she found a locked room in the basement. Curiosity got the better of her, and she picked the lock. Inside, she found stacks of cash, illegal documents, and a gun. Maria's heart raced. She had trusted John, but now she realized he was in deeper trouble than she thought. Could she continue to be with him knowing he was hiding such dangerous secrets? The love between them was strong, but was it strong enough to survive the dark truth? Maria stood frozen in the basement. The sight of the gun and the stacks of cash made her question everything. She had started to trust John, but this was too much. She left the basement quietly, pretending she hadn't seen anything, but inside, her mind was racing. What was John really involved in? That night, Maria couldn't sleep. She thought about confronting John again, but what if he lied? What if he was more dangerous than she realized? She felt trapped, torn between her growing feelings for him and the dark truth she had uncovered. John knew something was wrong. Maria had been acting distant again, and he didn't know why. He had been careful to keep his secrets hidden, but he could feel her slipping away. Desperate to win her trust back, John invited her and her son to spend a weekend at his country house. He hoped it would show her that he was serious about their relationship. Maria agreed, but she had her own plan. She needed to find out the truth about John once and for all. This weekend she would look for answers, even if it meant putting herself in danger. Little did she know, John had plans of his own, and they involved more than just a romantic getaway. At the country house, everything seemed perfect. John was charming and attentive, and her son, Luis, was having the time of his life playing in the big garden. But Maria couldn't relax. That night, while John was asleep, she snuck out to explore the house. She found another hidden room, this one filled with documents about illegal business deals and offshore accounts. Just as she was about to leave, she heard footsteps. John had woken up and was coming downstairs. Panicking, Maria barely managed to escape back to her room without being seen. Her heart pounded as she lay in bed, pretending to be asleep. She knew now that John was in deep trouble, but she still didn't know what to do. The next morning, Maria couldn't take it anymore. She confronted John once more, demanding the truth. John didn't deny it this time. He told her about his past, how he had gotten involved in illegal activities to save his company during a financial crisis. He didn't want to continue down that path, but now he was stuck. He said he wanted out, but powerful people were keeping him trapped. Maria was shocked but also sympathetic. She could see the pain in John's eyes, and a part of her wanted to believe him. But could she trust him? John begged her not to leave, promising he would find a way out. He even told her he loved her. Maria didn't know what to believe anymore. Days turned into weeks, and Maria stayed by John's side, but things were getting more dangerous. John's enemies were closing in, and Maria began to fear for her safety and the safety of her son. John assured her that he would protect them, but Maria wasn't sure if he could keep that promise. One night as they were having dinner, John's phone rang. He answered, and Maria could hear the tension in his voice. Whoever was on the other end wasn't happy. After the call, John told Maria they had to leave immediately. Someone was coming for them, and it wasn't safe to stay. John packed their bags quickly, telling Maria they had to go into hiding for a while. Maria didn't argue. She could see the fear in his eyes. They drove through the night, heading to a secluded cabin in the mountains. John said it would be safe there, but Maria wasn't sure if anywhere was truly safe anymore. The cabin was small and quiet, far from the luxury John was used to. Maria was worried, but at the same time, she felt a strange closeness with John in their shared fear. They were both running from something bigger than themselves, and in that moment, they only had each other. The first few days at the cabin were peaceful, but Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. One night, while John was outside chopping wood, Maria heard a knock at the door. Her heart raced as she opened it, expecting trouble. But instead, it was a man she had never seen before. The man introduced himself as a private investigator. He said he was hired to track John and expose his illegal activities. Maria didn't know what to do. Should she trust this stranger or stay loyal to John? The investigator handed her a file filled with evidence against John and told her to think carefully. He warned her that John was more dangerous than she realized. Maria's mind was spinning. She didn't know what to believe anymore. Was John the man she thought he was, or had she been living a lie? The investigator's words haunted her, but she couldn't bring herself to betray John, not yet. That night, she confronted John for what she hoped would be the last time. She told him about the investigator and the file. John looked panicked for a moment, but then he calmed down. He told Maria that the investigator was lying, that he was being framed by people who wanted to destroy him. Maria wanted to believe him, but doubt was creeping in. John decided it was time to disappear for good. He told Maria they couldn't stay in the country anymore. It was too dangerous. He had a plan to escape to another country where they could start over. Maria was hesitant, but John insisted it was the only way to keep them safe. They packed their bags once more, this time with no intention of returning. But as they were leaving the cabin, Maria spotted something strange, a black car parked down the road. She didn't say anything to John, but she knew they were being followed. The escape was about to get a lot more complicated. Just as they were about to leave, the black car sped toward them. John grabbed Maria and Luis, pushing them into the car as he hit the gas. A high-speed chase began, with bullets flying and Maria holding Luis close, terrified for their lives. Then, out of nowhere, the car chasing them crashed into a tree. John pulled over to see what had happened. To their shock, the man in the car was the private investigator. He had been working for John's enemies all along, trying to turn Maria against him. John turned to Maria, his face pale. "Now do you trust me?" he asked. Maria didn't answer. She wasn't sure if she could ever trust anyone again. After the shocking confrontation with the investigator, Maria felt a mix of relief and confusion. John had saved them from a dangerous situation, but how could she be sure that he wasn't still a threat? They decided to leave the cabin and drive to a nearby town to lay low for a while. Maria had so many questions, but now wasn't the time to ask them. As they drove, Maria kept stealing glances at John. He seemed more determined than ever, but she couldn't shake off the unease. They stopped at a small motel, and while John checked in, Maria took Luis to the bathroom. Looking at her son's innocent face made her heart ache. She wanted to protect him, but did she know how? The motel room was cramped, but it felt like a refuge from the chaos outside. Maria tried to distract Luis with a game, but her mind kept wandering to the mysteries surrounding John. She watched as he made a call in the corner of the room, his voice low and serious. Who was he talking to? When he hung up, John seemed more relaxed. He turned to Maria and said, "We're safe for now. I have a friend who can help us." The promise of safety felt good, but Maria couldn't help but feel anxious. What kind of help did John's friend provide? Was this person connected to his dark past? Later that evening, John's friend arrived. His name was Mark, and he had an air of confidence that both reassured and worried Maria. Mark was a tall man with sharp features and a serious expression. He greeted John with a handshake, then turned to Maria and Luis, offering a warm smile. After a few pleasantries, Mark got straight to the point. "John, we need to move fast. Your enemies are already on your trail." Maria listened closely, her heart racing. Mark explained that they needed to gather evidence to protect themselves from John's rivals. The more she listened, the more questions flooded her mind. Mark proposed a plan. They would collect evidence against John's enemies while also finding a way to clear John's name. Maria felt a wave of hope. Maybe they could find a way out of this nightmare together. But as John and Mark discussed their strategy, Maria felt a growing sense of foreboding. Later that night, Maria asked John about his past and why he had gotten involved with dangerous people in the first place. John took a deep breath and confessed that he had made bad choices to save his company from bankruptcy. He thought he could handle it, but things spiraled out of control. Maria felt sympathy for him, but she still worried about the road ahead. As the days went on, Maria watched John and Mark work together. They seemed to have a strong bond, but Maria couldn't shake off her suspicions about Mark. He had an intensity that made her uncomfortable. One night, when she overheard them talking, she caught a glimpse of something she didn't like, a hint of manipulation in Mark's tone. Maria decided to keep a close eye on Mark. She didn't want to interfere with John's plans, but she had to protect her son and herself. She knew they were in deep waters, and trusting the wrong person could be disastrous. One day, while John was out with Mark, Maria received a phone call from an unknown number. Hesitant, she answered. It was the investigator again. He warned her that John was still involved in illegal activities and that she needed to leave him for her own safety. Maria felt torn. Part of her wanted to believe the investigator, but she also knew how much John cared for her and Luis. She hung up, feeling more confused than ever. Should she trust the man she had fallen in love with, or should she heed the warning of a man she barely knew? That night, Maria confronted John about the call. John was furious. He told her that the investigator was trying to scare them and that they had to stick together. Maria could see the hurt in his eyes, but doubt still lingered in her heart. I want to believe you, John, she said softly, but I need to protect my son. John's expression changed. He stepped closer, holding her hands. I promise I'll do everything I can to keep you safe, he vowed. Maria felt a flicker of hope, but deep down, she was still afraid. With Mark's help, John began gathering evidence against his enemies. They spent days collecting files and meeting informants. Maria stayed behind with Luis, but she couldn't help but feel anxious about what John was getting into. She wanted to help but feared the danger that came with it. One evening, John returned with a look of determination. He explained that they were close to uncovering a major crime that would expose his enemies. Once we do this, we can finally be free, he said. Maria wanted to be excited, but she felt a cold knot in her stomach. The night finally came when they were to confront John's enemies. Maria was a bundle of nerves, pacing in the small motel room. She had to trust John and Mark, but the stakes felt higher than ever. Luis was asleep, and Maria wanted to keep it that way. She didn't want him to witness anything dangerous. John and Mark left for the meeting, promising to return soon. As Maria waited, time seemed to stretch. She tried to stay calm, but her mind raced with thoughts of what could go wrong. A knot tightened in her stomach, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were headed into a trap. Hours passed, and Maria started to panic. She couldn't reach John or Mark, and the silence felt suffocating. Just as she was about to go looking for them, she heard a loud knock at the door. Heart pounding, she opened it to find two men, dangerous-looking and aggressive. "Where's John?" one of them demanded. Maria felt fear wash over her, but she kept her composure. "I don't know," she lied. The men exchanged glances, and Maria could see the malice in their eyes. She knew she had to protect her son at all costs. Maria quickly thought of a plan. "He's not here, but he'll be back soon. If you want to catch him, you need to wait." The men hesitated, unsure of what to do. Maria seized the moment and added, "I can help you. I know where he might be hiding." To her surprise, the men considered it. They pushed their way inside, demanding she show them. Maria's heart raced as she led them to a false lead, hoping John and Mark would stay safe. She felt a mixture of fear and determination. She would do anything to protect Luis. Just then she heard a noise from outside. The sound of a car skidding to a stop made her pulse race. Maria had to think fast. "Stay here," she ordered the men, and dashed to the window. To her relief, it was John and Mark. They had returned unexpectedly, and Maria knew this was her chance. She turned back to the men, her heart pounding. "They're here. Let's go," she shouted, trying to lure them out of the room. As they moved toward her, John burst through the door, tackling one of the men. A fierce struggle ensued. John fought with everything he had while Maria stood back, holding Luis tightly. Mark joined the fight, and together they overpowered the two men. Maria could hardly believe what she was witnessing. This was the dangerous world John had been trying to protect her from. As the men lay on the ground, John turned to Maria, breathing heavily. "I'm so sorry, Maria. I should have told you everything." Maria felt a mix of relief and anger. "You put us in danger, John," she yelled. But deep down, she knew they had to stick together. Once the men were tied up, John explained everything to Maria. They were part of a larger crime syndicate that had been targeting him because he wanted out. He needed evidence to expose them, but he also needed Maria's help to do it. Maria listened, her heart heavy with the weight of the truth. She had fallen in love with John, but the darkness of his world threatened to tear them apart. "What do we do now?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. John laid out a plan. They needed to turn the evidence over to the police but had to do it carefully. If the crime syndicate found out, they would come after Maria and Luis. John was determined to protect his family at all costs. Maria felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. "Can we really trust the police?" she asked. John nodded. "We have to. It's the only way to make sure they can't hurt us anymore." Maria took a deep breath, knowing this was their only chance to find freedom. The next day, John made the call to the police. He explained everything, his illegal activities, the threats, and the evidence they had gathered. Maria listened anxiously as he spoke, feeling a mix of admiration and fear for the man she loved. Would the police believe them? Once the call ended, John looked at Maria, uncertainty in his eyes. "Now we wait," he said. They were on edge, not knowing if the police would come through. As the hours passed, Maria felt a knot in her stomach. Would they finally be safe, or was this just the beginning of another nightmare? That evening, the police finally arrived. Maria and John briefed the officers on everything that had happened, showing them the evidence they had collected. The officers listened closely, taking notes and asking questions. Maria held her breath, hoping they would take them seriously. After a thorough discussion, the lead officer assured them they would investigate the situation. Maria felt a wave of relief wash over her, but the fear remained. Would they really be safe now, or was this just a temporary reprieve? As the police left, Maria and John took a moment to breathe. They were finally taking steps to escape the darkness surrounding them. Maria felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they could build a new life together after all this chaos. That night, Maria and John talked long into the night, sharing their fears and hopes. John promised he would never let anything happen to Maria or Luis again. As they sat together, Maria felt a warmth growing in her heart. Maybe love could conquer even the darkest of challenges. Just as they were starting to relax, Maria received another call from the investigator. He warned her that John's enemies were onto them and that they had to leave immediately. Maria's heart sank. It seemed they could never catch a break. John overheard the conversation and looked worried. "What did he say?" he asked, his expression darkening. Maria relayed the message, and John's jaw clenched. "We can't let them take us down. We need to move now," he said decisively. They packed their bags quickly, knowing time was of the essence. John's mind raced as he strategized their escape. They couldn't go back to the motel, and they had to find a safer place to hide. Maria's heart raced. She knew they had to stick together, but the uncertainty was suffocating. As they loaded the car, Maria felt a surge of determination. They had fought so hard to stay together, and she wouldn't let fear tear them apart now. "Where do we go?" she asked, looking at John. He thought for a moment, then replied, "There's a safe house I used to use. It's hidden and should keep us safe." They drove through the night, the tension palpable in the car. Maria held Luis close, whispering reassurances to him, while John focused on the road ahead. The landscape blurred by, but Maria's thoughts were racing. What if they were caught? As the miles passed, John occasionally glanced at Maria, trying to gauge her mood. "We'll get through this," he said softly. Maria nodded, but her mind was filled with worry. They had come so far, but now they were running again. She couldn't shake the feeling that danger was still lurking around every corner. After hours of driving, they finally arrived at the safe house. It was a small cabin in the woods, secluded from prying eyes. Maria felt a sense of relief wash over her as they stepped inside. This would be their temporary refuge. The cabin was basic but comfortable. Maria immediately set to work making it feel like home, while John set up security measures around the property. As they settled in, Maria felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this time they could finally find peace. Life in the safe house was quiet but challenging. Maria had to adapt to a new routine, keeping Luis entertained while John worked on gathering more evidence. Days turned into weeks, and the isolation began to wear on Maria. She felt trapped, like a bird in a cage. One evening, as she sat with Luis reading a story, she couldn't help but feel a sense of longing for a normal life. "When can we go home, Mommy?" Luis asked, looking up at her with innocent eyes. Maria felt a pang in her heart. She didn't know how to answer him. Would they ever go home? One day, while John was out, Maria received a call from Mark. He had news about the investigation. "We've made progress, but we need more evidence." "I'll come by tomorrow," he said. Maria's heart raced. Could this be the break they needed? As the call ended, she felt a mix of excitement and fear. What if they were getting too close to the truth? She knew John trusted Mark, but something about him still made her uneasy. She hoped her instincts were wrong. When John returned, Maria told him about the call. He seemed hopeful but also cautious. "Mark is a good guy. He's got our backs," John reassured her. But Maria couldn't shake off the nagging feeling that something was off. That night, as they lay in bed, Maria couldn't sleep. She watched John as he drifted off, his face relaxed in slumber. She wanted to trust him completely, but doubt lingered in her mind. Would they truly be safe once the evidence was gathered? The next morning, Mark arrived with a stack of documents. He spread them out on the table, explaining what they meant. As Maria listened, she suddenly recognized a name, one of John's former business partners who had been acting suspiciously. "Wait," Maria interrupted, "I know him." She quickly recounted a conversation she had overheard between John and Mark a while back. John looked at her, surprised. "Are you sure?" he asked. Maria nodded, feeling a surge of confidence. This could be a crucial piece of evidence. As they worked through the documents, Mark proposed a plan to set a trap for the business partner. "If we can get him to talk, we can gather the evidence we need," he suggested. Maria felt uneasy about the idea. It felt risky, and she worried about what could happen if things went wrong. John seemed eager to proceed, sensing this was their chance to finally escape the cycle of danger. "We have to do this," he insisted. Maria glanced at Luis, who was playing quietly in the corner. She couldn't shake the fear of putting him in danger, but she knew they needed to act. Over the next few days, John and Mark devised a plan to lure the business partner to the cabin. They would stage a meeting, pretending that John wanted to discuss business matters. Maria helped prepare, but anxiety gnawed at her. Would this work, or would it lead to more trouble? As the day approached, Maria felt a mixture of excitement and dread. She wanted this to be the turning point, but she also worried about the fallout. They had come so far, and the thought of everything falling apart was unbearable. The day of the meeting arrived, and Maria felt the tension in the air. She watched as John prepared to meet his former partner. "Stay hidden with Luis," he instructed her, "and only come out if I call for you." Maria nodded, her heart racing. When the partner arrived, the atmosphere shifted. John greeted him with a false smile, but Maria could see the tension in his body. She held Luis close, listening intently as the conversation unfolded. Would this be the moment they finally found the evidence they needed? As John and the business partner talked, Maria felt a sense of dread building. She could hear the subtle shifts in tone, the tension rising with each passing moment. Suddenly, the partner's demeanor changed. He seemed suspicious and began asking probing questions about John's intentions. Maria held her breath, praying that John would stay calm. Just as things began to escalate, John called for her. "Maria, come out," he shouted. Maria stepped into the room, her heart pounding. "What's going on?" she asked, feigning innocence. The business partner's eyes narrowed as he recognized Maria. "You shouldn't be here," he sneered, turning his gaze back to John. "You've dragged her into your mess." Tension crackled in the air as John faced his former partner, determination etched on his face. Maria could feel the heat of the moment. This was it. They were at a crossroads. John stood his ground, refusing to back down. "You don't scare me anymore. I have evidence against you," he declared. The partner laughed, but it was a nervous laugh that sent chills down Maria's spine. Just then Mark, who had been waiting outside, burst into the room. "We have to go now," he shouted, eyes wide with urgency. "They know we're here." The partner's expression shifted from arrogance to panic. Maria felt the world spinning. They were running out of time. John grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back door. "We can't let him escape," Maria yelled. But John knew they had to prioritize their safety. They darted out the door, adrenaline pumping through their veins. They scrambled into the car, with Mark taking the wheel. "Where to?" he asked, glancing at John and Maria. "Anywhere but here," John replied, breathless. As they drove away, Maria looked back at the cabin, heart racing. They had narrowly escaped, but danger was still very real. John turned to Maria, his expression serious. "We need to regroup and come up with a new plan," he said. Maria nodded, knowing they couldn't let fear take over. They had to fight for their freedom and their future. They found a safe haven at an old friend's house on the outskirts of town. It was secluded and hidden from view, which gave Maria a sense of comfort. They settled in, grateful to have a moment of peace after the chaos. That evening, as they sat together in the dimly lit living room, John took Maria's hand. "I'm sorry for putting you in danger," he said, his voice filled with regret. Maria squeezed his hand, reassuring him. "We're in this together, John. We'll find a way out." Days passed, and they continued to gather evidence, but tension lingered in the air. Mark seemed increasingly impatient, pushing for faster action. Maria noticed the change in his demeanor and felt uneasy. What if he had his own agenda? One night, as they were discussing their next move, Mark suggested a risky plan that made Maria's heart race. "We need to confront the partner head-on. It's the only way to ensure he doesn't come after us again," he said. John hesitated, sensing the danger, but Maria felt a sense of dread. Maria felt torn. They needed to act, but she didn't want to risk their lives. "What if something goes wrong?" she asked, looking at John. He met her gaze, a mix of determination and fear in his eyes. "We can't let him take us down. We need to protect our future." After much discussion, they reluctantly agreed to Mark's plan. It felt like they were walking a tightrope, balancing between fear and hope. As they prepared for the confrontation, Maria's heart raced with uncertainty. Would this be the moment they finally gained control, or would it lead to disaster? The day of the confrontation arrived, and Maria felt a weight on her shoulders. They headed to a location where they hoped to find the business partner. The atmosphere was tense, and Maria couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. When they arrived, the location was eerily quiet. John and Mark exchanged worried glances. "Where is he?" John muttered, scanning the area. Just then, the business partner appeared, flanked by two intimidating men. Maria's heart sank as she realized they were outnumbered. The partner smirked as he approached them. "I see you've brought your little entourage," he taunted, eyes flickering between John and Mark. Maria felt a surge of fear, knowing they were in over their heads. "Let's end this now," John said, trying to sound confident. But Maria could sense the tension in his voice. She held her breath, praying for a way out. The partner laughed, his eyes glinting with malice. "You think you can take me down? You're just digging your own graves." As tensions escalated, Maria felt the ground shift beneath her. She couldn't let them fight alone. "We have evidence against you," she shouted, stepping forward. "You won't get away with this." The partner's expression changed, anger flashing in his eyes. In that moment, Maria realized she had to take a stand. The fight wasn't just about John, it was about protecting their family. She glanced at Luis, who was waiting in the car, and knew they had to finish this for him. Suddenly, chaos erupted. The partner's men lunged at John and Mark, and Maria felt her heart race. Without thinking, she grabbed a nearby branch and swung it at the nearest man, surprising everyone. The blow sent him staggering back. "Get Luis!" John shouted as he fought off one of the attackers. Maria's heart raced as she sprinted back to the car. She couldn't let anything happen to her son. She jumped into the driver's seat, frantically trying to think of a way to escape. Just as Maria was about to drive away, she heard a commotion outside. John and Mark were struggling against the attackers. She couldn't just leave them behind. Taking a deep breath, she decided to help. With a quick glance back at Luis, who was still safe in the car, Maria jumped out, ready to fight. She rushed towards John, swinging the branch at the nearest attacker. With each swing, she felt a surge of determination. She was fighting for her family, and nothing would stop her. The fight intensified, and Maria felt a mix of fear and adrenaline. She could see John and Mark holding their own, but the odds were against them. Just as Maria thought they might be overwhelmed, she heard sirens in the distance. Relief washed over her. "Police!" she shouted, hoping it would turn the tide. The partners' men hesitated, and John seized the moment. "Now!" he yelled, and together they pushed back against their attackers, fighting with everything they had. As the police arrived, the partner and his men realized they were trapped. They tried to flee, but the officers quickly apprehended them. Maria felt a rush of relief as she watched the chaos unfold. Justice was finally being served, and they were safe. John turned to Maria, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You were incredible," he said, pulling her into a tight embrace. Maria felt a weight lift off her shoulders. They had fought hard for their freedom, and now it was within reach. In the following days, the police conducted a thorough investigation. The evidence John had gathered played a crucial role in bringing down the crime syndicate. Maria felt a sense of closure as they watched the news report detailing the arrests. Though they were still in hiding for a while, the atmosphere was lighter. John and Maria began to dream of a future where they could finally feel safe. Maria looked at Luis, who was playing happily, and felt a wave of hope wash over her. With the threat behind them, John and Maria began planning their next steps. They discussed moving to a new city, far away from the past that haunted them. Maria felt a sense of excitement. Maybe they could finally build a new life together. John was determined to start fresh and leave the darkness behind. "We'll make sure Luis has the life he deserves," he promised. Maria smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart. They had fought for this chance, and they weren't going to waste it. After weeks of planning, they found a small house in a quiet neighborhood. It felt like a new beginning, and Maria couldn't help but feel hopeful. They unpacked their belongings and began to settle in. As they transformed the house into a home, Maria felt a sense of belonging. They filled it with laughter and love, creating memories that overshadowed the darkness of the past. John watched Maria and Luis with pride, knowing they had finally found a place of safety. Life in their new home was different. They focused on healing and rebuilding their lives. Maria enrolled Luis in a local school, and he thrived in the new environment. John started a new business, determined to make it a success. Though shadows of their past lingered, Maria found comfort in their fresh start. They spent weekends exploring their new town, laughing together as a family. Every moment felt precious, and Maria cherished the bond they had forged through adversity. As time passed, Maria and John grew closer. They shared their hopes and dreams, discovering new depths to their relationship. John often surprised Maria with little gestures, reminding her of his love and commitment. One evening, as they watched the sunset, John turned to Maria. "I never thought I'd find someone like you," he said softly. Maria felt a warmth spread through her heart. "We've come a long way," she replied, leaning in for a kiss. As they settled into their new life, Maria began to see glimmers of hope for the future. John's business was thriving, and they were slowly building a life filled with love and laughter. But deep down, she still worried about the shadows that could return. One day, Maria received a call from the investigator who had been following the case. He informed her that the crime syndicate was dismantled, and their threats were neutralized. Maria felt a wave of relief wash over her. Maybe they could finally move on. Not long after, Mark showed up unexpectedly. He wanted to check in on them and see how they were doing. Maria felt a mix of gratitude and caution. While he had been a part of their fight, she still remembered the uneasy feelings he had stirred within her. Mark was genuinely happy to see them thriving, but Maria could sense a shift in his demeanor. He seemed more intense, and Maria wondered. As Mark shared stories about the ongoing investigation, Maria couldn't help but feel a twinge of discomfort. The memories of their harrowing escape and the constant danger they faced resurfaced in her mind. She glanced at John, who was engaged in the conversation, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Mark was lingering too long, as if he was searching for something more. "Are you planning to stay in touch with the police?" Maria asked, trying to steer the conversation away from their past. Mark nodded, his expression serious. We need to ensure that everyone involved in the syndicate is brought to justice, including any remaining associates. It's crucial for your safety, he said. As Mark left, Maria felt a heaviness settle in her chest. While she appreciated his support, she couldn't ignore the tension between them. Do you trust him? She asked John as they cleaned up the living room. John paused, glancing out the window. He helped us when we needed it most, but I understand your concerns. I'll keep my guard up. Maria felt a small wave of relief at John's words. They had fought so hard to establish a safe life, and she didn't want anything to jeopardize that. Over the next few weeks, they settled into a routine that felt almost normal. Maria took Luis to the park, where he played with other children. John worked diligently on his business, his confidence growing each day. Together, they forged a life filled with laughter and love, but Maria still felt a nagging worry about Mark's intentions. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Maria turned to John. Do you think we'll ever be free of our past? She asked. John took her hand, squeezing it gently. We're building a future now, and that's what matters. We'll protect what we have, he reassured her. Just as Maria began to feel a sense of peace, her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. Hesitating for a moment, she answered. Hello. The voice on the other end sent chills down her spine. Maria, it's time to settle the score. The voice was deep and menacing. Her heart raced as panic washed over her. Who is this? She demanded, trying to sound brave. Let's just say I'm someone who hasn't forgotten what you did. You can't run from your past, the voice replied, a cruel laugh echoing before the line went dead. Maria's hands trembled as she hung up. She felt the world around her tilt, her heart racing as she glanced at John. We have a problem, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. John turned to her, concern etched on his face. What happened? A threatening call, Maria replied, her voice shaking. They know where we are. The fear in John's eyes mirrored her own. We have to go to the police, he said, his tone urgent. Maria nodded, feeling the weight of dread settle over them again. They rushed to the police station, their hearts pounding in sync with the urgency of the situation. Once inside, they reported the call, and the officers listened intently. The lead detective, a woman named Officer Hayes, assured them they would take the threat seriously. Your safety is our priority, she said, taking notes. We'll increase patrols in your area and make sure you have a safety plan. Maria felt a mix of relief and lingering fear. They had trusted the system once, but now doubt clouded her mind. Officer Hayes walked them through the safety plan, emphasizing the importance of staying vigilant. We'll need to keep an eye out for any unusual activity, she advised. If you notice anything suspicious, call us immediately. As they left the station, Maria felt a sense of unease. What if they find us? She whispered to John, her voice laced with fear. John took her hand, his grip firm. We won't let that happen. We'll stick together, no matter what. That night, they returned home, tension thick in the air. As they settled in for the evening, Maria tried to distract herself with games and stories for Luis. Yet, the fear lingered in the back of her mind, casting a shadow over their attempts at normalcy. John stayed close, his protective nature shining through. They locked doors and set up extra security measures, but Maria couldn't shake the feeling that danger was looming just out of sight. The next morning, they heard a knock at the door. Maria's heart raced as she exchanged worried glances with John. Who could it be? She whispered. John motioned for her to stay back as he opened the door cautiously. To their surprise, it was Mark. I need to talk to you, he said urgently, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Maria felt her gut twist. His presence added to the tension that had already enveloped their lives. Mark wasted no time. I've been following some leads, and I think you're still in danger, he said, glancing around the room as if assessing their safety. Maria's heart sank. What do you mean? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. I think someone is after you, and it's connected to the Syndicate, Mark explained, his eyes serious. They've been looking for you since the arrests. You need to be cautious. John's jaw clenched, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "We thought we were safe," he said, frustration evident in his voice. Mark quickly laid out a plan. "We need to relocate you temporarily until we can get a handle on this. It's not safe for you to stay here," he insisted. Maria felt a wave of panic wash over her. "We just settled in," she protested. "I know it's difficult, but it's for your safety," Mark replied. "We need to act fast before they find you." John looked at Maria, gauging her reaction. "What do you think?" he asked. Maria's mind raced. They couldn't keep running forever, but the thought of putting Luis in danger was unbearable. "If it's the only option, then we have to do it," she finally said, her voice trembling. They quickly packed a few essentials, knowing they couldn't waste time. Mark arranged for them to stay at a safe house for a few days while the police continued their investigation. Maria's heart ached at the thought of uprooting their lives once again, but she knew they had no choice. As they drove away from their home, Maria felt a sense of loss. They had fought so hard to create a safe space, and now it felt like everything was slipping through their fingers. Arriving at the safe house, Maria felt a mix of fear and relief. It was a modest, secluded place, far removed from the chaos of their lives. John took charge, ensuring all windows were secured and the doors locked. "This will be temporary," he reassured Maria as she looked around, feeling the weight of uncertainty settle in her stomach. They settled into their new surroundings, but the silence felt heavy, amplifying their worries. Days passed, and life in the safe house was tense but quiet. John and Mark worked closely with the police to gather information, while Maria tried to keep Luis entertained. Every noise outside made her jump, her nerves on edge. One evening, as they sat around the small table for dinner, Maria noticed John's brow furrowed in thought. "What's on your mind?" she asked, concerned. "I just can't shake the feeling that something is off," he replied, glancing out the window. Later that night, Maria received another call, and her heart sank as she recognized the number. She hesitated, but curiosity and fear compelled her to answer. "Hello." "Maria," the voice on the other end was familiar, sending chills down her spine. "You can't hide forever. I will find you." The call ended abruptly, leaving her breathless. She rushed to John, panic in her eyes. "It's them again. They know where we are." John's expression hardened as he processed the information. "We need to inform Mark and the police immediately," he said, his voice steady despite the fear bubbling beneath the surface. They quickly contacted Mark, who assured them he would take immediate action. As they waited for the police to arrive, Maria felt her heart race. This was not just a threat, it was a declaration of war. They were in the crosshairs once again, and she feared the worst. When Mark arrived, he looked grim. "We need to ramp up security. They're clearly not giving up," he said. The police worked to set up a perimeter around the safe house, ensuring they would be alerted to any threats. As the officers surveyed the area, Maria felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this time they would be ready. Mark outlined a plan to keep them safe and gather more information on the threats against them. Despite the increased security, Maria felt the tension rising within the house. She could see the worry etched on John's face, and it broke her heart. They had fought so hard to create a life for Luis, and now they were being pulled back into a nightmare. One night, as they sat in the dim light of the safe house, John took Maria's hand. "No matter what happens, we'll face it together," he said, determination in his eyes. Maria nodded, grateful for his strength, but deep down, she felt a growing fear that they were running out of time. Just as they settled in for the night, a loud crash echoed through the house, followed by shouts. Maria's heart raced as she grabbed Luis, pulling him close. "Stay quiet," she whispered urgently. John and Mark rushed to the windows, peering outside. "We're being watched," John said, his voice low and tense. Maria felt a surge of fear, knowing they were no longer safe. Just then, the front door burst open, and masked figures stormed in, demanding their surrender. John pushed Maria and Luis behind him, ready to protect them at all costs. "Get back," he shouted, his voice filled with rage. The attackers advanced, but John fought fiercely, trying to hold them off. Maria's instincts kicked in. She couldn't just stand by and watch. She grabbed a heavy object from the table, ready to defend her family. As the chaos unfolded, Maria felt a surge of adrenaline. She was fighting for her life, and she wouldn't back down. In the midst of the struggle, Maria caught sight of one of the attackers who seemed less aggressive, his eyes darting around as if unsure of his role. In a moment of instinct, she shouted, "You don't have to do this. We can help you." The man hesitated, confusion flickering across his face. It was a risk, but Maria knew she had to take it. "You know this isn't right. You can walk away," she urged, praying for a moment of clarity. To her shock, the man lowered his weapon slightly, caught off guard by her words. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he admitted, his voice shaky. Maria seized the moment. "Then don't. We can find a way out together." John's struggle continued, but he could see the shift. "Maria, what are you doing?" he shouted, but she remained focused on the man, trying to reach him. "You have the choice. Help us, and you can leave this life behind." The man hesitated longer, glancing at his fellow attackers. It was a pivotal moment. "You don't have to be a part of this," Maria pressed. "There's still time to change." Just then, the police sirens blared in the distance, growing louder. The attackers exchanged worried glances, and in that split second, the man made his decision. "I can't let you get hurt," he said, moving toward Maria and John. "Let's get out of here." With the police closing in, the situation escalated. "We need to move now," the man urged, leading them toward the back door. Maria grabbed Luis, her heart racing as they followed his lead. "Go, go!" John shouted, and they sprinted toward the exit. The sound of footsteps echoed behind them, and Maria pushed herself harder, desperate to escape. As they burst out into the night, Maria felt the chill of the air on her skin. They dashed into the woods behind the safe house, adrenaline fueling their escape. The police were close, and she could hear shouts in the distance. "Stay close," John instructed, keeping a protective arm around Luis. The man led them deeper into the trees, and Maria felt a flicker of hope that they might make it out alive. As they ran, the sounds of the chase grew fainter. The man turned to them, his expression serious. "We can't stay out here long. They'll be searching for you," he said. "You need to trust me." John hesitated but nodded. "We're out of options." Maria felt a mixture of fear and hope. Could they really trust this stranger? But in that moment, they had no choice. After a tense trek through the trees, they reached a small, abandoned cabin. The man quickly ushered them inside. "We'll hide here until it's safe," he said, glancing back nervously. Maria's heart raced as she realized how much they were relying on him. Once inside, they locked the door, their breaths heavy with exertion. John turned to the man. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to gauge if they could trust him. "I'm Alex," he replied, his voice steady. "I was just looking for a way out myself." As they caught their breath, Maria felt a sense of camaraderie with Alex. "Why were you with them?" she asked cautiously. "I got caught up in something I didn't understand," he confessed, looking down. "I didn't want any part of it. But I felt trapped." Maria could sense the pain in his voice, recognizing that he, too, was searching for redemption. They settled into the cabin, listening for any signs of danger outside. Maria held Luis close, feeling the warmth of his small body against hers. John paced the floor, anxiety etched across his face. "Do you think they'll find us?" Maria asked softly. "I don't know," John admitted. "But we need to be ready to move again if we have to." The night stretched on, tension hanging in the air. They exchanged stories with Alex, learning more about his past and the reasons behind his choices. Maria felt a flicker of understanding, realizing that they were all survivors in their own right. As dawn approached, Maria felt a sense of determination wash over her. They had faced so much together, and she wouldn't give up now. "We'll find a way to make this right," she said, looking at John and Alex. John nodded, his resolve strengthening. "We'll stick together. No one gets left behind." Maria felt a sense of hope rising within her. They had fought too hard to let fear control them now. With the first light of dawn filtering through the trees, Maria felt a renewed sense of purpose. They would not let their past define them. Instead, they would fight for their future. As they huddled together, She realized they had forged an unbreakable bond, united by their shared struggle. "Whatever happens next, we'll face it together," she said, squeezing John's hand. "Together," he echoed, determination shining in his eyes. As they planned their next steps, Maria felt a glimmer of hope. They had come too far to turn back now. The journey ahead would be challenging, but they were ready to face whatever lay ahead, side by side. With newfound strength, they prepared to reclaim their lives and build a future free from fear. Together, they would rise from the ashes of their past, stronger than ever. Just as they were discussing their next steps, a knock echoed through the cabin, freezing everyone in place. Maria's heart raced. "Who could that be?" she whispered, fear creeping back in. "Stay low," John instructed, his voice firm. They moved silently toward the door, tension thick in the air. "It could be the police, or it could be someone else," he warned. They peered through a crack in the wooden boards and saw a familiar face, Mark. Mark looked frantic as he scanned the area. "It's me." "Open up," he shouted softly, urgency lacing his voice. John glanced at Maria, who nodded cautiously. They had to trust Mark. He had been their ally before, and they needed help now more than ever. John opened the door, and Mark slipped inside, relief washing over his features. "I was worried about you. I've been trying to track you down," he said, glancing nervously around. "I've got news." Once they were inside, Mark quickly explained his findings. "The Syndicate is still searching for you. They want to make an example out of anyone who opposes them," he said, his expression serious. "But I have a plan to get you out of this mess." Maria's heart pounded in her chest. "What do we need to do?" she asked, determination in her voice. Mark laid out his plan, detailing a route that would lead them to a safe location far from the Syndicate's reach. As they prepared to leave, the group gathered supplies for their journey. Maria felt a sense of urgency as they packed food and water, knowing they had to move quickly. "We can't stay here any longer," she said, her voice resolute. Luis, sensing the tension, clung to Maria's leg, his big eyes filled with worry. "Are we going home, Mommy?" he asked softly. Maria knelt down and hugged him tightly. "We're going to be okay, sweetie. We just need to be brave for a little longer." With everything packed, they set out into the early morning light. Mark led the way, keeping a steady pace as they navigated through the dense woods. The sounds of nature surrounded them, but Maria couldn't shake the feeling of danger lurking in the shadows. "Stay close to me," John said, wrapping an arm around Luis as they walked. Maria felt a mix of fear and determination. They were on a journey for their lives, but together they could face anything. As they moved deeper into the woods, they suddenly heard voices up ahead. "We need to hide," Mark whispered urgently. They ducked behind a cluster of trees, holding their breaths as a group of men passed by, their hushed voices revealing they were part of the Syndicate. Maria's heart raced. "What do we do?" she whispered, panic creeping into her voice. Mark held up a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. They waited, hearts pounding, until the men were out of sight. Once it was clear, they cautiously emerged from their hiding spot. "We can't take the main trail anymore," Mark advised, his eyes scanning the area. "We need to take a back route." John nodded in agreement, his protective instincts kicking in. "Lead the way," he said firmly. They moved off the beaten path, navigating through the thick underbrush. Maria felt the weight of fear on her shoulders but also a flicker of hope. Just as they thought they were making progress, they stumbled upon a clearing, and Maria's heart sank. Standing in the center were several men from the Syndicate, their faces twisted in anger as they spotted the group. "There they are," one of them shouted. "Run!" John yelled, pushing Maria and Luis ahead. Mark stood his ground, ready to confront the men. "I'll hold them off." "Get to safety," he shouted, determination etched on his face. Maria hesitated for a moment, torn between helping Mark and protecting her son. "We can't leave him," she cried, panic rising. "Go. Now." Mark insisted, his voice strong. With tears in her eyes, Maria grabbed Luis's hand, and they ran, fueled by desperation. As they sprinted away, Maria glanced back at Mark, who was facing the Syndicate with bravery. She knew they had to find a way to safety and that their fight was far from over. They had come too far to turn back now, and Maria was determined to protect her family at any cost.